Well, we want to welcome you to a Facebook Live. We are Faith and Lois, and we host the podcast More to Life with Faith and Lois. Thank you for being with us this afternoon.
I'm Faith.
Yes, and I'm Lois, and we normally are hosting podcasts that have to do with transitions.
Right.
But today we thought we would join you in the wake of the two deadly shootings over the weekend in less than 24 hours that claimed more than 31 lives.
Such a tragedy. And the emotional impact on all of us is wide ranged. Yeah. There's every emotion under the sun that we're all feeling, from fear to anxiety to stress to helplessness, powerlessness, and anger. Yeah. So we want to be able to encourage you today that whatever you are feeling, whatever you're encountering, it all makes sense. And then to how to move through some of this.
Right. So if you are just joining us right now, because we didn't give you very much heads up, and you want to engage with us, we would love it if you want to let us know via, of course, watching us and texting us. We will respond to any questions you have. But we have a number of questions for you as we are discussing this. And if you aren't able to listen now, maybe you'll be able to see what we're talking about later, because we know that this has taken an impact on all of us.
Yes.
In the last 3 days, and in some different level. And granted, it's Monday today, so it's a few days behind it, but we're still reeling and thinking about it and wondering what is next.
I know it is. It's just kind of that loss, that sinking feeling of not knowing, because we're still in shock that there could be two back to back shootings in the way that they happened. You couldn't even process one and you were into the second. And that's hard. That is really hard to comprehend that and to process that out.
So we are asking the question today, where do we go from here?
Yes.
And we're not going to revisit all that happened, but on Saturday, you know that the incident happened in El Paso, Texas, and then early yesterday morning, it was in Dayton, Ohio. You know, just a week before, it was at the Gilroy Garlic Festival in Gilroy. So we have just been seeing a series of shootings that weren't workplace events, not that those are any different for someone who is affected, or even school shootings, but these are ones where, for some situations, there were targets. And so we sit here today, breathing deeply, very thankful that we are alive, and mourning the loss of what's happened to all of those families who are now having to deal with this kind of tragedy.
How did you feel when you heard the news?
You know, it took me a little while. Sadly, I will admit, it's becoming something of numbness falls over me initially. And I look at it in shock, and then I want to know more details, and then I sit back. And then suddenly last night, I'm not sure when the turn happened, but it took a while with all of it to sink in, that I started to look at friends and family dynamics that I have that aren't healthy. And I wondered, my goodness, what would it take for someone to turn? And I wondered in myself, do I show enough kindness? Am I grateful enough that I can overcome some of this darkness? Because we can look at all sorts of things, we can lay blame everywhere, but I know that in myself, I am responsible for how I react and respond to people. And knowing that there are people who don't like me or don't like others that I know, what have I done to step up and actually say, enough?
We are all a part of this big village, and we are a part of this society that I think sometimes when we feel impacted, we don't necessarily see how we are woven into the very fabric of what is happening. And it doesn't mean that we go out and do what some of the events happened this weekend. But if you're angry and it becomes hateful, that has an edge of its own. And we need to be responsible for, how am I reacting? How am I responding to the events in the world right now, and the events that are taking place within our country? And that we take ownership and saying, you know what, if I hate, or if I'm angry, or if I do this big dig towards somebody at work or on Facebook or some other social media, what am I investing into the society that is ugly as well? And so it's an opportunity, as painful as it is, to take inventory, of anything that might be unsettled or distorted, and even maybe a little dark that we would rather ignore and shove away and say it's not there, but own it and to process it out.
And I think for all of us who have children or grandchildren or nieces or nephews, we're faced with how to respond and communicate these kinds of tragedies. I mean, especially when they happen when you're shopping at Walmart. How many of us were at Walmart this weekend doing shopping for certain things, or at a Target, wherever you were? I think we are now finding more and more places where if we think there is a place to be safe, we are mistaken. And if we think there is a person that can be safe, we are mistaken. So how do we then respond to being careful, to engaging in life, and then not terrorizing our own children and our own family members by having them fear going to places where something like this can happen?
Because we have to continue to live, and we should not be dominated by fear. At the same time, fear is probably and more likely to start rising up inside of us. So it's about being alert, being aware, being prepared. And it's just heavy because it's that unpredictable factor that is so scary. We want to be in control. We want to know what's going to happen. We want to know that we can go to the grocery store and we're fine. We want to know that we can go to Walmart or wherever to a concert and we are safe. We want to be and have that assurance. And we don't always have that right now. And so how do we deal with that? How do we wrestle with that? And I think for me personally, I've just had to get centered within myself and go, I know who I am and I want to live that out wherever I go. And I want to be the best person I can possibly be when I'm in public and when I'm in private. And if I can have that assurance, that is something I can be assured of. I can count on that because I've established that for myself.
And you'll walk in that, which is beautiful. So we're asking a couple of questions this afternoon. If you would like to participate in any way, how are you managing your emotions around the shootings? And I want to thank you, several of you, for hopping on board with us. And Ruth has written, thank you for addressing this trauma. It is overwhelming. And it is overwhelming. And there are a lot of tears. And I think what came up for me last night, as you were asking me earlier, is I really started questioning those times where I'm kind or I'm not kind. And there has been an active effort in our podcast. We've been talking about this on using positive language. It sounds silly, but there's been an active effort to start thinking like that. So this happened, and I will tell you, it was as if a cloud or a cloak had come right over me and was sitting there. And how was I going to get out from underneath that last night is what I had to wrestle with. And I remember talking to my husband. We were walking the dog, and I wanted to scream because I don't know how to process all of this. I don't know who to say what to, but all I know is who's in my circle, who's in my circle. And, you and I communicated. So we start communicating with those who are with us, and we hold each other up. And I think for me, that's really, really important because while we might all things that we might consider things that we do are trite, they actually start building and adding to the people that we're with, and we have a strength with each other.
They do. And it's important too that you, just like you said, that you processed it out by talking about it. Talk to people that can really hear you and hear your heart, and you can hear them. And I did get on Facebook, and I had a dialogue, and there were a lot of different points of view, but I stayed very calm and I stayed very kind and loving through the process. And I felt really good about that because I could hear everyone else. And it wasn't about who's right and who's wrong. It was really hearing the intensity of emotion that was rising up within everyone. And so sometimes it comes out with an absolute, like, no, this is the answer, or no, this is the right way. And if you can kind of override that and hear, wow, this is a way that people are processing out what they do not understand, you can enter into a dialogue with that.
It's definitely disconcerting when you look at what's happened in the past year, where there have been specific targets, whether it's Muslims or Jews or African Americans, and now Hispanic Americans, and then all Americans or anybody who happened to be out in Las Vegas when that mass shooting took place. So we have to get to this place where groups are being targeted for a variety of reasons. And what is our voice as we stand up for not just any group, but all of us together,
Yes.
combined? And I think that's so important. Whenever we start celebrating our differences, that everybody is this way and this way and this way, it leads to people then feeling they are better than, or I am better than, or you are better than. So how can we break down some of those barriers of difference that allows us to get to this place of anger where we feel we're not getting enough? Because that's it, right? There's a model of scarcity. We're afraid we're not going to get the job we want, or someone is taking over a shopping center, or whatever we've decided. And so therefore we have to put people out. It is crazy making.
It is, because we are all a part of the human race. And if we are in America, we are Americans. And if you are immigrants who are not fully woven into the fabric of our tapestry yet, you are here because you want to be. And so we need to embrace the fact that we are human beings, not some kind of an object that can be done away with or dismissed or discredited. And if we can begin to see that our society is built on people who feel, who hurt, who have families, who think, who imagine, and who want the best, how could you want anything destructive to happen to any of us?
You know, when you look at all of the groups that have been targeted, we all eventually fall into one of them. And I think that's where it's a joke to think that anybody is safe necessarily. And yet we don't want to walk around with armor on and be frightful. But the alertness that we were talking about earlier, being aware, being in the moment, being present of your surroundings is really critical. And we're going to see much more of that, I believe, going forward. I don't know about you, but I'm always looking behind my back. I am making sure I'm not on a phone when I'm getting out of a car, walking any place. And that's been my modus operandi for a very long time because of my background. But I think more and more people are going to become far more aware. And yet, what can you do in the midst of all of that? So some of our questions this afternoon, we're not trying to incite fear, but just make people, all of us, more aware. And one of the questions we have is, what thoughts came up for you when you heard about what happened?
I was crushed. I was absolutely crushed. And I started crying. And I immediately started thinking of the families. And it was really hard for me to go to bed that night knowing how this works. I mean, we've been through it so many times. We know that when there's a mass shooting, those bodies have to remain there for so long. And I really had a hard time going to sleep that night, knowing that there were families that were crushed, knowing that their loved ones were still in Walmart, and that there was nothing that can be done until the investigation is done. There's so many heart-wrenching aspects to what is happening that we need to recognize the fact that this is so emotional, and there's such so much intensity with the emotions that occur as a result of this. So yeah, that was my first reaction: just shock, sadness, devastation.
My anger turned in the evening to fear as I thought of people that I know who are so angry, because there were a lot of good people last night who were making some comments that I thought were well worth listening to. And one of them was that whether it's on social media or wherever you are, people are more likely to commit violent acts if you know someone who's committed a violent act, or if you know someone who's really angry. So it brought up for me, how do I speak up when I know people around me are really angry? How do I speak into that? How do I love somebody in that kind of situation, And it's really challenging, but I'm really called to do that as a human being.
I know,
as someone who's sitting here watching what's happening, because if social media, if viral shootings, if shooting like this can go so viral that in less than 24 hours, there's something that could have been far worse happens like that, you realize, what is there to stop anybody other than the voice of one person to another?
Exactly. But it's interesting that oftentimes we look at the history of the people who do these tragedies and are the ones that actually pull the trigger. And if kinder words had been spoken earlier, We have no idea if that would have been a turning event in someone's life when they were younger. Because usually, and as we're hearing already, the history of the one particular shooter is very dark and was very much, again, a rejection of society. And so words have a powerful impact. And they start early, and it started early when he was a little tiny kid. And so many times we hear that story. But that's why our words in any given situation of kindness, of care, of patience, of tenderness, even if the person you feel in the moment doesn't deserve it, when you can offer it, you have no idea how that might impact the entire world.
You know, when we learned that in the second shooting in Dayton, Ohio, the young man arrived with his sister and a friend, and then his sister was gunned down by him. You understand that in that moment, could something have been done or said? And we can't turn back the clock.
Right.
What is what is. But it makes me wonder in that moment, how powerful are the communications we have with somebody that we're in a car with that we have no idea is set to take off and do something like this. And I think that makes me super conscious about people, again, that I know sometimes are on the edge. And we all know who we're talking about, right? I mean, we all run into people where we go, oh my, if they got really angry, I wonder what would happen. And I think it's good, for me at least in this moment of time, to really consider, what would I do? What am I saying in this moment? And what is my attitude and my presence around someone like that? It could really make a difference.
It can. So consider that. Consider not only maybe that dark space within yourself that I talked about earlier, as to what needs to resolve within yourself to be a kinder, more gentler, more caring person. And then think about your language. What is my language like? And how can I use different words to de-escalate a situation, and to even de-escalate yourself when you start feeling yourself get rise up and more intense. So these are just little nuggets, but they can make a huge difference. Oh, and then the other thing is, don't ignore your emotions. Whatever you are feeling, if you are raging inside, that's not a bad thing. It's okay to be angry at something that is so horrifying. And it's okay to feel afraid and sad and hopeless and powerless, but don't stay there. Process it out. Talk to someone. And if you find yourself stuck, please seek out someone that is a professional that you can process this out with, because it will make a huge difference in your life.
And if you've been inundated with the images and watching too much news over this,
Stop.
It doesn't have to be that way. You can pull away. And I think one of the reasons we're having this dialogue is look into yourself, see where some of that negativity is still present in all of us, which it is, and what can you do to counter that? And then look into the lives of people that we know are hurting and have expressed frustration and anger that we wonder could be escalated with very, very little. What can we do in that moment to help de-escalate? And to know that we are not all powerful. There are things out of our control, and these are some of those things out of our control. But what's not out of our control is how we, on a daily basis, react to, respond to, engage with those wherever they are, driving on the road, somebody who's really pissed off in a car, to somebody in a grocery line that is really angry because they've been shortchanged. I mean, whatever it might be, how can we step into some of those moments?
Go and do something good. It can make a difference.
So if you've never listened to our podcast, More to Life with Faith and Lois, we do a lot of things, and we're mainly focusing on transitions in life, which can be dark, which can be difficult. Last week's was on suffering, which leads to joy, and it was a really powerful one and helped remind us of a lot of things. We also have a newsletter, if you'd like to subscribe to it. We have a website, moretolifewithfaithandlois.com, so you can always go on there and check it out.
So thank you for joining us, and we hope you listen to the podcast. And tomorrow it's going to be the impact of wisdom, and we hope you'll join us then.
We could use a lot of wisdom in this situation. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Goodbye.